OpenAI has just come out with some awesome announcements. Looking on LinkedIn, it popped up for you and me, Jaden, with our buddy Logan Logan Kilpatrick over at OpenAI, who always, just as we were just saying, always has the goods, does a great job over there. But about new API developments and GPT-4 turbo developments and all that kind of stuff. It just looks phenomenal, like lower costs, everything. Jade, this is like your realm. You saw this, you got really excited. You're like, we have to talk about this. Walk me through what's happening here.
Okay, yeah. So there's a bunch of different things. We have price cuts, we have new APIs, and we have, I think, the biggest thing, which maybe let's cover this first. If you've been following, if you've kind of kept your finger on the pulse of OpenAI Twitter pretty much, you've noticed there's a lot of people that I've been seeing taking screenshots of essentially they'll ask ChatGPT to do something. Developers get this a lot too. It's like, hey, parse this code and do this thing, and it's like, okay, I did the first line of this CSV file for you, now you know how to do the rest of them. And they're like, no, I don't want to do the rest of them, I'm coming to you because I don't want to have to freaking parse this thing 800 times. And it's so anyways, they've been screenshotting that, complaining about it. They're like, what the heck is going on with ChatGPT? Is it getting lazy? Where did it get this training data that it will just do a little bit and okay, now you know what to do. So in any case, one of the big updates that they've just announced is that in GPT-4, this is a quote, they said, this model completes tasks like code generation more thoroughly than the previous preview models and is intended to reduce cases of quote unquote laziness where the model doesn't complete a task. So anyways, I think this is really interesting. I don't know. Have you seen any of those, Connor? Or is this just me?
Jane, we love conspiracy around here. And, my favorite one around GPT was that it followed this winter lull or something where, you read this study where it's like the population, everybody slows down at Christmas. So does GPT. Look, I love these things about how you can talk to ChatGPT, take a deep breath, think this, I'm going to tip it, all that. I love those things. This winter one never really made a ton of sense to me, but I mean, maybe, but I also have no other explanation. I also found it kind of slowing down a little bit, but we also saw that, Jane, do you remember last year? And I might have this wrong, but I think it was when Code Interpreter came out and things really slowed down. And what we were kind of hearing, on Twitter and from folks kind of on the back end from OpenAI, not officially, but sort of saying look, when we tweak something major, it's hard to know everything else that happens in the model. And so, OpenAI has been making some, big leaps and big swings, which we've been talking about. It's hard to say, has that tweaked that black box? I don't know. What's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what it's going to do now. I got to run it through some tests, but I definitely have noticed, here's an interesting thing. I have a prompt that I have used repetitively. If I go into my ChatGPT history, you can just edit and then run it again. So I have one particular prompt that I use for a podcast where I'll put a bunch of articles in and I say give me bullet points of kind of what's happening with this news story, and I run it. Anyways, it's interesting to me because mostly I've been pretty concise or pretty similar. It's always been pretty much the same style because I worked on the prompt and now it's good. But a handful of times over the last couple months, I've noticed that it will give me a result that's pretty different than what I'm used to normally getting. And I'm like, what the heck? And I just rerun it and it reruns and then it's fine. But I'm wondering if sometimes I'm wondering why did that happen? Why out of literally 100 runs of this prompt, is it the exact same for 95% of the time, and then there's 5 times in there where it's just kind of randomly not good? And it's oh, whatever, I just regenerate. The problem I think in this comes when you embed these AI models into your product. So for example, with self-pause, we rely on OpenAI's API to do our AI life coach chat. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have our own prompts and things and custom stuff in there, but we still are using a backbone of OpenAI to help with a lot of the natural language and conversation stuff. So even if out of 100 times, 5 times it kind of throws a weird response to someone, it's really not a good look for us. And I think all developers are in the same boat there. So I'm excited to see where this goes. We won't know exactly, I guess, for a while until people start testing it. But I'm interested also, one thing, and I'd be curious to get your perspective on this. Do you think the fix is a big model retrain kind of thing? Or do you think they literally just like sort of how like when you get an image from Dolly 3 generated, they like have like a whole bunch of bullet points before they pretty much have a pre-prompt. Do you think they just gave it a pre-prompt that's like, if someone asks you a question, instead of only giving half of it, make sure you always give the full thing and don't be lazy? Like, do you think they just
I mean,
threw
look,
like
it would be
something in that?
I mean, look, it would actually be a smart thing to do. So, gosh, what's his name? Is it? Do I have this wrong? Riley Goodside, who's on Twitter, who does a ton of this stuff, and he sort of did this thing that Rachel Wood and other people picked up about this prompt injection. I don't know if you saw that, but it's like, hey, paste this prompt, and it was something like that, and it had, I don't know how it worked, but like invisible text, all that kind of stuff, and it did that. And when OpenAI it does see that, right? OpenAI and our friends there are like all over Twitter, and so when something's getting a lot of traction, all of a sudden everybody's like, "Hey, let's do this. Let's keep doing this. They can go in there and create something specific around that, and they'd be fools not to, right? I mean, I
Right.
also think that that's why, like, with this whole thing with hey, I did it with an Irish person because I'm half Irish. It's like, hey, make this more Irish. Now make it more Irish. Make it more Irish. And now I'm finding that you can do that a few times, and it's like, I've really made it as Irish because the stereotypes were getting just out of control. And it's fine if it's like your own people and all that kind of stuff, but like, my God, can you imagine how bad this could be for people who like want to misuse that? And now I'm finding that because that was like this hot, like trending thing, after a while, it's like, that's Irish enough, Connor. I think you're all set. You know what I mean? Like, and that's brilliant, right? Because I think that I don't know how the back end works at all, but I would not be surprised at all if they literally went in there and tweaked those exact things. Don't you?
Yeah, that's hilarious with the Irish one. For those that don't know, it's kind of a funny trend where on like Twitter they'd be like, "Here's a picture of an office worker. For every 10 likes this picture gets, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to make them like more of a work at home person." And then it just like all of a sudden like their monitor gets bigger and their background gets like crazy, and like now they have 1,000 stacks of books, and now they're in like this giant, anyway, it just gets like more and more extreme. And pretty much usually, I don't know about you, Connor, but like I found all of them at the end ended up in some like psychedelic cosmos landscape with like rainbows and lightning bolts firing in all directions because you just keep asking it to make it more extreme. I actually think I saw an Irish one where, yeah, it's like make them more Irish, and by the end it was like this red-headed leprechaun with rainbows exploding in all directions and gold. It was
Literally.
hilarious.
But that's the thing, right? So I do think that they're sort of seeing these little tweaks. I mean, look, the case with the New York Times is a great example, right? I mean, like that what New York Times was able to replicate, for example, was they were able to get, I think, a specific thing from Wirecutter. Now, my thought is that New York Times probably like did this a million times, broke all of the prompting policies and all that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to be an OpenAI apologist or anything like that, but I am just sort of saying that they took something from Wirecutter that was repeated over and over again in the internet, which so made it easier to sort of like kind of quote unquote plagiarize, and they're going in there taking care of that. So I am wondering, sort of like, Jaden, when you sort of see these updates that they put out, and they put out a blog post about it, what are the things that get you like most excited as as a developer yourself and everything like that? Like, how do you see this? Like, what's the big sort of like takeaway for you?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just like, every update I feel like is just bringing me closer to GPT-5, so I'm just excited for
Yes.
that. Hearing rumors of Sam Altman talking at like Y Combinator to a bunch of people about kind of what to expect down the pipe. So I think there's some exciting stuff. And I mean, at the end of the day, anytime they put out an update that's going to make it even marginally better, I think I think it's hard to understand how many developers have linked this into their current platforms and products, like so many software tools. And so when they make a small update, it's like they're like updating, like, let's just say like 40% of like all software tools just got 10% better,
Yeah.
so I think that's cool. One other thing I'll say that's interesting though, they also said that they got some updates to GPT 3.5 turbo, right? That's the one that
Yep.
everyone can use for free. But what's interesting is they didn't actually say what happened there, so people are trying to figure it out. All they said is there's various improvements.
Yes.
um
Yes.
Seems like it's probably like some minor stuff. I do think it's cool though that like for GPT-4 they're trying to fix the laziness problem. GPT 3.5 they're like, it's free. It could be lazy.
I
We'll give
mean,
it
but
someone else.
in fairness, like, my gosh, how much are they even paying for 3.5, right? I mean, like, the other big thing is obviously the cost going down, right? Like the big thing that Logan was talking about, and they're talking about, everybody loves this idea that you can embed 63,000 pages of text for $1. Now, when you think about what it must cost OpenAI to process 63,000 pages of text. It cannot be $1. It can't. Right. So, I mean, that's the crazy thing, too, is that like, and maybe that's why we're hearing, Sam Altman talking all about, chip factories and nuclear fission and all that kind of stuff, just because I don't know how they're doing this, but that's not my problem to figure out. I am just thrilled for the developers who all of a sudden like token price and all that kind of stuff has seemed to go on like way, way down.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And for those that don't know, they cut the price of the tokens going in, right? So like if you upload like a full book, you got to pay for that bandwidth. So they cut that by 50%, and then they cut the price of the content coming out by 25%. So both awesome price cuts. People are arguing, they're like, well, it's because there's all these like open source models that are coming out, and they're worried. Like I think Mistral is probably the big elephant in the room there. They're like, Mistral, like on benchmarks, performed very similar to GPT 3.5 Turbo. So like it's pretty dang good. It's open source, and people are like, why wouldn't I just run that myself? So I think OpenAI, on the one hand, they're probably trying to respond to some of those open source, and on the other hand, they're probably like getting more efficient in their processes, and so they can bring the price down. So I think both of those things are really cool. One thing I want to touch on really quick though is you brought up embedding, and I think a lot of people probably don't 100% understand what this is. So I wanted to do a bit of a breakdown, which is embeddings are essentially a way to determine how similar two words or two sentences are to each other. That's pretty much what an embedding is, and you use this for a lot of things. OpenAI uses this, or any of these AI models use this to like determine sentiment analysis, right? Like you give it some text and it's like, oh, this is happy or negative tone. Essentially what they're doing is you can imagine like a graph, and you put like 10 words on there, like happy, angry, sad, mad, disgusted, glad. And it's like, how similar are these 10 words to each other? And they all get a different point on the graph, to how similar they are to other words. But you're not just comparing them on like a y-x axis of like positive and negative. You're comparing them on like a lot of different things, a lot of different, like thousands pretty much. So imagine thousands of accesses. It's like a 3D giant map of like 1,000 different data points of how similar they are. What OpenAI ends up doing is taking each word and assigning a number to it. And that number is pretty much like a coordinates on this giant, 3D multidimensional graph. And what you do is whichever of the numbers are the most similar, that's essentially how similar the words are to each other. But what's cool is you do it with words, but you can also do it with phrases. So the whole phrase, it's like, how similar is this whole phrase to that whole phrase? Now, it sounds like kind of abstract, and it's like, what is it used for? Okay, sentiment analysis makes sense. What we actually recently used it for with AI Box, we're building out some tools where essentially, when you generate an article, for example, for your website, and you want to provide backlinks like between, like interlinking all of your articles, right? Let's say you write 100 articles, and there's a keyword in one that you want to like give more context to on another article. What we actually did is we used these OpenAI embeddings, and we created like a tool essentially that could go and grab the title of an article, and then it would read every single, so when they talk about like uploading the 60,000 pages, you have pretty much, it's like you're taking the whole screenshot of the article and you're putting it into like an embedding thing. So it's like a data set sort of like we actually went a little extreme. We made 80,000 articles for this tool when we were building it. We have 80,000 articles. It grabs the titles of all of them, and then so it knows like what it's talking about, and then it grabs all the text of it, reads every single line, and we put like interlinking link in every single paragraph to like a similar article to give you more context. So like if someone's reading and they want more context about something in a paragraph, they get another. Anyways, that's a really good use case for like giving people more context in articles. You see it in Wikipedia with all the blue links, but also for like Google SEO. A lot of people want it. So we actually recently used this tool. I think this was probably like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So when they announced that they're lowering the price of all the embeddings and making some changes here, I got pretty excited, and I think
that's
a lot
awesome
of people
because
will be excited too.
No, that's awesome to share that, because like when people sort of see this, like, because I don't use I don't use the API or anything like that, but when you sort of see like what it means like at that kind of scale for everybody, and then scale that up across developers, you can see why developers were like over the moon about this today. So that's kudos to OpenAI for this, I think.
Yep. And the final thing that they made an update on is, I think they released a new version of their free moderation API. So I didn't actually, to be honest, I don't know if you've used this or seen this. I literally didn't know they had this till they made this announcement, but apparently they have an API that helps you identify like potentially harmful text. And they've just made a new version for that. I guess it's free. So that's kind of maybe just a little a gift OpenAI gave us.
That's wild. Yeah, this is par for the course for OpenAI to sort of like make like 3 announcements in one and kind of like bury
Yeah.
the lead sometimes. That's really cool, man. Yeah, awesome.
So, yeah, a ton of cool stuff out of OpenAI. If you enjoyed the podcast episode today, if you learned anything about embeddings or any of the other crazy stuff we're talking about today, make sure to leave us a review on the podcast. We seriously, seriously appreciate it. We love having you guys around. We love having you all as listeners. We hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day. And I hope that we'll see you next week.